بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Well, my name is Yoram van Klaveren. I'm from the Netherlands, and I used to be a member of the PVV. It's probably a party that you do not know, and if you do know, that's something special to know. It's the party of Geert Wilders. Maybe you've ever heard of him, the guy with the blonde hair. It's not his real hair color. I know. But he founded the party in 2006, and it's called the PVV, the Freedom Party of the Netherlands. And the main goal of that party was to make sure that Islam was not able to grow in the Netherlands, and later on it was the purpose was to ban Islam from the Netherlands in total. Well, I'll come back to that later. Maybe it's interesting that I introduce myself a little bit. My name is Yoram van Klaveren, as I said, and I grew up in a very Orthodox Protestant environment. My mother and father were members of the Reformed Church. I have an older brother, a sister, another younger brother. We went to church. We read the Bible. We did all the things that normal Christian people do. But we were we were members of a very strict denomination of the Christian Church. So other religions, were gone astray, in the opinion of the theologians of my church. So that's something that it was not explicitly said, but it's something that you learn during the days that you get raised till let's say 16, 17. I had a certain religious bias towards Islam, not specific Islam, but other religions in general. But Islam was certainly not an option to look at in a positive way whatsoever. I studied religion, comparative religion, when I got older. I went to university. But you take, of course, the things you learn in your upbringing with you. So that's something I did too. I became politically active after 9/11, because September 11, 2001 was the first day of my study of comparative religion. So it was a strange kickoff. After that, we had a murder in the Netherlands. Maybe you've heard of it, Theo van Gogh. He was murdered by a jihadist. A lady who is active in the United States as well, who's from the Netherlands, Ayaan Hirsi Ali. She was in parliament when I was an assistant of a politician back then. So the whole sphere in a political sense and in a social sense was very anti-Islam. Of course, you had the terrorist attacks in London, Madrid, etc., etc. So there was a certain, time that the view that people had when it came to Islam became a negative and more negative, more negative. And I think that another thing that's very important that played a role in the way I developed myself is the fact that in Europe there is a historical bias towards Islam because of the historical clashes, and we have crusades from the Christian church towards the Islamic world. There are attacks from Ottoman Empire, for example, on the Christian part of the world. So there have been clashes for hundreds of years, one side, the other side, and the other way around. And the combination of those things, the start of my comparative religion study at September 11, 2001, the fact that Theo van Gogh was murdered, my upbringing, and I think the historical bias of Europe when it comes to Islam, the combination of those things made me want to become politically active, and I was searching for a party who was most anti-Islam. Well, I found that that party. It was Geert Wilders from the PVV. And I did everything I could when I became a member of parliament. It was in 2009, 2010. So that's way back. And yeah, the last, I think, 7, 8 years, of the 7, 8 years after that, I did everything that I could to stop Islam from growing. I tried to get legislation to ban Islamic schools in the Netherlands, to ban all mosques, to prohibit reading the Quran. So, and in one time we made legislation, or we tried to make legislation to ban Islam in general from the Netherlands, of course, and alhamdulillah, it didn't work. But that was something that we tried. And I left Islam. Sorry, I left the political party, the PVV, in 2014, 2015, and that was because it was an anti-Islam party. But in 2014, 2015, Geert Wilders was active at a rally, a right-wing rally, and he asked the people, "Do you want more or less Moroccans?" And the whole crowd shouted less, less, less. And then he said, "Okay, I'll make that happen." And that was, for me, was a point that I thought, okay, I'm still anti-Islam, but this has nothing to do with anti-Islam anymore. This anti-Moroccans. So I asked him to take his words back or change it or do whatever to play it down a little bit. He said, "No, why should I?" So then I left, and in 2017 I stopped politics in general. I do something else now. I work for the radio and teach and other things. No politics anymore. But there was one long-held desire that I had, was writing an anti-Islam book, because I was still anti-Islam, only not active in the politics anymore. And I was, I thought it would be a very important thing that all the things that I said and that anti-Islamic people and groups say, that we have a theoretical basis with great grounds, so we can point to the book when people have discussions, and we would solve the dispute about Islam. Is Islam a religion of peace, or is it something very wrong and evil when it comes to Europe or the West or the world in general? So I started writing the book, but I always had, as a Christian guy, my doubts on certain dogmas of the Christian Church, for example, the Trinity, the crucifixion of Christ, and I thought those were points when it comes to the Christian dogmas that are difficult to understand. So, but I was writing the book, but those, I tell you this because it comes back later in my story. I tried to write the book, and what I did was all the objections that I had, and those were, for example, Islam promotes terror. That's something that I thought. Islam is anti-women, Islam is anti-Jewish, Islam is anti-democracy. Well, all the prejudices and all the stereotypes when it comes to Islam, I had. And what I did was starting to read and reread the articles and the books that I already read. But at some point I came across information that was at odds with the things that I was used to read and what I learned in the past. So I started writing letters to several ministers, to imams, and to scholars. And one of those scholars was Abdul Hakim Murad. He's a professor from University of Cambridge. But I didn't know that. I just followed a line. I thought, oh, well, he's a scholar, so I write. And I didn't know if people would write back, because I put a little link from Wikipedia, and my own page is in English as well. So I thought, okay, I give them at least the information so they know who they are talking or writing with. And after I find out who he was, I thought, oh, well, he will never answer. But he is one of the greatest scholars in Europe when it comes to Islam. And but he did, and I got a 17-page mail back and I thought, whoa. So I started reading and reading and reading, and he asked me at the end, how is it possible? Because you studied comparative religion at Free University, where Abdul Hakim Murad also taught in the past. So he asked me, what happened? And what titles did you read, and what's the information you got? So I gave him a list with titles. He said, okay, I know where you're coming from, I understand. And I explained that when I was younger and I was at university, the points that I mentioned earlier when it comes to the historical bias and the upbringing, etc.,